Hey there, it's Carlie, your host of the Expat Focus Podcast. Are you looking for trusted experts to support your move abroad? We have some recommendations for you. From international health insurance to cross border financial planning and international moving companies. Just head to expatfocus.com, hit the services tab at the top to find out more. What does moving to Spain really look like for a third country national, and how do you know if it's right for you? Joining me in this episode is James Blick, the founder of Spain Revealed, and we cover lifestyle differences in different parts of the country, popular visas and requirements, and why your vision for your life in Spain matters more than the nitty-gritty logistics at the start of your planning. James, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm so curious because we're kind of neighbors in our
Yeah, we are.
originating countries.
Well, you're an Aussie, I'm a Kiwi, and you're in France and I'm in Spain. So in more
Uh,
ways than one.
yeah, definitely. How did you come to be living in Spain?
So I've been in Madrid for 14 years now. Came here, in 2011. I actually moved to France when I was in about 2005, 2006. Teach English. Just wanted to have an adventure in Europe, and probably deep down was sort of thinking of I'd have some sort of French, cinematic romance or something like that. And I did have a romance, but I met a Spanish woman in France, and she became, she's now my wife, Yolanda, and so she's from Madrid. And so we lived in France for about a year, spoke French to each other for the first year, which her English wasn't super confident and my Spanish was non-existent. So, and then after that, a few years later, moved to Spain, after a few years in New Zealand, trying that out, but just wanted to live in Europe. I just loved Europe. So it made sense to come back to Spain. I fell in love with her and I fell in love with her country. And that's history. And now I've, what it's like. Where is home, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
So,
New Zealand's in my blood, but I almost feel like Spain is too. This is home.
and how did you come to decide to found Spain Revealed?
Well, I used to. Well, I used to own a company which is still around, a food tour company called Devour Tours, which I co-founded in sort of 2013. I fell in love with Spain and with Madrid, the food, the tapas bars. Wanted to share all of that, and so along with a friend, we founded this company where we effectively led food tours and showed people all the best places to eat in Madrid. That grew and grew and grew. Some just pre-pandemic, we were offering tours all over Europe. Had a big team, but as that grew, I stopped guiding tours and started sort of running the company. And I missed guiding tours, so I started a YouTube channel in about 2013 or so called Spain Revealed, which was just my way of just sharing really Spain at that point. And really started to dedicate more time to that around just before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened, and I noticed a lot of people in the audience. Obviously, tourism was not happening at that time. I noticed a lot of people in my audience were watching the videos for inspiration and planning to move to Spain. And I thought, I have a law degree. I love the kind of analytical side, but I also love teaching. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I would love to kind of help people on this journey. So sort of pivoted more away from the tourism into the relocation aspect in about 2020, and really kept doing the YouTube channel, but just sort of started, introducing topics of, what it means to move here, how you do it. And now I run a course called the Move to Spain Masterclass, which is I offer it twice a year, as helps people really understand in real detail how to make a move like this without, costly mistakes and things like that. So yeah, it's I love it because I say it combines my love of Spain, teaching, my sort of lawyery analytical side. Kind of, I can do a bit of everything with it.
And James, we're speaking in 2025.
Yeah.
What is the top nationality, I guess, interested in moving to Spain? Where are people coming from the most at the moment?
Well, my audience is different from, if you look at Spain generally in terms of where where are immigrants coming from? Where are people moving from? I mean, the biggest areas are parts of Europe, North Africa are the most common ones. But my audience specifically is North Americans. So it's always been North Americans who watched the YouTube channel, mainly from the US and also Canada. There's also Aussies and Kiwis and Brits. And so the people that I really help are, by and large, I find the people that gravitate are from North America, and they're not the biggest chunk of people moving to Spain, but there is uh, more of them than there used to be because there's more visa options now with the digital nomad visa, and also with all the kind of the politics going on in the US. There's a lot of people looking for somewhere else to live. And I think cost of living is a big one. Ever since I've been helping people move, particularly from the US, I've had a lot of people who have said, look, we could retire in the States, but we'll have to work until we're 70. And in Spain, I can retire at 50 and have a good life. And so it's really a lot of different reasons that, Americans are looking to move to a lot of places actually at the moment. So for a variety of reasons.
Retiring at 50. Okay, well, this leads me to my next question, which is,
we
what
can
is
we
it?
can only dream, right?
I'm like, is that real? Because I thought even in France the retirement age is higher now. And
Yeah.
so what element do you think of Spain is most misunderstood by foreigners?
Well, it's funny. I was just looking at this. I shouldn't go onto TikTok or Instagram as much as I should, but I was looking at this post that had sort of gone viral of this young guy who was here, and he was like, Spaniards never seem to work. They're always Europeans, and Spaniards are always on holiday, and I think there's a misunderstanding about there's an understanding and a misunderstanding about what life is like here. Look, if you're coming to retire, you're not going to be hustling and working, right? But also to think that you're going to come to a country where everyone's just having a siesta all the time and always on holiday and things like that. Maybe compared to the US, where it's almost become like you have to grind to survive. Spain is like that, and I know France is like Spain a little bit, that we appreciate.
I wish we had the siestas
Yeah,
though.
that's true. But the siesta thing, it's like, yeah, most people can't take a siesta. They will, take one on a holiday if they can. So I think there's a misunderstanding about just what kind of the complexities of the culture, right? People work hard. There's people who are retired and who are enjoying their life, and I think that can sometimes lead through to a misunderstanding about what someone's life will be like when they move to Spain. People are often, you go on holiday to a place and you're like, oh, I would love to live there because I can, be paella by the sea and tapas and things like that. And I always say to people, you got to get your vision clear. Like, what's a boring, rainy Tuesday afternoon going to look like in your life? And you have to build to that. So I think sometimes the misunderstandings of like Spain, you see Spaniards in the bars and you think they're all in the bars all the time. You think that's going to be your life. And it's like, well, no, people lead real lives here, and you will need to lead a real life too. Doesn't mean you can't have paella by the sea. Yes, you can, but
I
maybe not
mean,
every day for lunch.
in your regular working week, how much are you eating paella by the sea?
Well, I'm in Madrid, so very little, unfortunately. So I think, look, this is a country where it is true that it's very easy to live a work-life balance, right? One thing I've found, I'm a workaholic. Like, that is my tendency that I have to push back against. Yep, yeah, it takes one to know one. Um, and if I was living in San Francisco, New York, or maybe even Auckland in New Zealand, if people around me are working really hard, then it's like, oh, I got to keep going. But it's the Spanish culture kind of it doesn't enable that worst instinct in me. And it allows me, actually, because the people around me often are taking a moment to take a holiday. It's like it gives me permission actually to kind of lean into that. And look, this means obviously if you're coming here to work as a remote worker, as a digital nomad, that's important. I think you can have a lifestyle balance. If you're coming here as a retiree, I think it's also important because you have a culture around you where it's not just people rushing around. Like, people have time to engage and to connect and to have a chat. So I think that that's something I really love about living here. But I again, my whole thing is it's like it's kind of cheesy, but it's like kind of like hashtag real talk. It just annoys me when people oversimplify things, because when you are building going to build a life in a place, well, if you go with a very simplistic idea, you might be disappointed about the life you build. And so I really want people to have a clear vision and really to build towards that vision and to be specific. and to understand how the country really is. It's wonderful, but it's complex. It's real. So then you can build a real life in the place.
Well, then let's get into some of that real talk when it comes to the differences between different parts of Spain. We've already
Yeah,
established that you're not eating by paella by the sea in
yeah,
Madrid, obviously for geographical reasons.
yeah, yeah. Geographical reasons and having a 4-year-old, but yeah.
What distinguishes somewhere like Madrid to? I mean, I went to Mallorca
Mm,
for Christmas
yeah,
the other year. Just I wanted the sunniest place in Europe that
yeah.
I could get, and that was one of the top destinations, and it was amazing. But I'm guessing living in Mallorca is very different to living in another part of Spain.
100%. And I would love to be able to speak from real world experience of living in Mallorca. I'm sure it would be amazing. But yeah, what I see, and it's true, speaking about location, location is really one of those decisions that takes people the longest. And so it should. Like sometimes a place just clicks, right? But I think it's very connected to I don't like using the word success of a move, but people's kind of happiness when they arrive in a place. When you move neighborhoods in your own city, it's like, or into a new home, to a new apartment, it's like if it clicks, and everything kind of around it clicks. And so I really encourage people to spend time on that decision, both online research, then intentional scouting trips, because Spain is so varied. It's geographically varied. The language changes. So in Mallorca, there is a language apart from Spanish, right? Whereas in Madrid, it's Spanish. In parts of northern Spain, say the Basque Country, there's another language, or in Catalonia. And in southern Spain, some parts there's what somebody might say is a really thick accent that people can sometimes, if you're coming to Spain and you are learning Spanish, can be a challenge to understand at first. So the variety is key. And I think, Mallorca versus Madrid, obviously Madrid is for people who are looking for that urban environment. They want to be able to go to the opera. That is important. They want to be able to jump on a plane to anywhere in Europe. Whereas Mallorca is for those people who want to disconnect. They want to be able to walk to the sea. And look, in a way, these conversations are challenging because I would love to be able to jump on a plane and walk to the sea. But in the end, what I've
Yeah.
found is that even in a big country, maybe like France as well, but certainly in Spain, when you come at it with fresh eyes, be like, there must be so many different places I could live, and there are. But once you narrow down your vision, you might be picking between sort of 2 or 3 places that fit that vision, or you might have sort of competing visions. You're not sure if you want the big city or the walk to the beach, and you need to really get that clear because there's going to be a few options that fit each one.
I think it's also about what those different cities and villages are like at different times of year
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I know here in Strasbourg, the city in summer is completely different vibe compared to autumn, compared to
hmm,
Christmas market season, compared to the dull months,
yeah,
between January and April.
yeah.
And I'm guessing, Mallorca in winter when I went was quite pleasant and not crowded and quite enjoyable. But I imagine it's very different in peak season.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you said that because, you know, actually, my wife and I were looking at moving to a new neighborhood in Madrid, and we're sort of looking at different neighborhoods. And there was one neighborhood we visited in March, and it was like, oh, not feeling it. Then we went the other day, and it was like, I'm feeling it. What's the difference? Well, okay, one was quieter, but it's not like I'm looking for noise. One was sort of warmer where they had more energy. But I think visiting places, ideally at different times of the year to see that variety, or even thinking about when is the worst time I could visit. If I don't want rain, then I'm going to visit northern Spain, which is very green, looks like New Zealand, it looks like the UK, and it rains a lot more there. I'm going to visit in January and just see how it feels, if I could really survive that. But then again, you don't want to get just like test a place and just stress test it. That's the only thing. So yeah, go in July if you can. I often think, I see people who do quite a few scouting trips if they have the finances and the time as they lead up. And I think that can be a great idea if you have the opportunity to do that and really visit moments. And the other thing I would just say also, if somebody's looking at scouting, say Spain or moving anywhere, you know, make it a road trip. It's very easy often in Europe with these fast trains. It's like I'm checking out Madrid, then I'm fast training to Valencia, but like if you're in a road trip, if you're in a car, you can really see how the landscape changes. You can see you can stop off in little towns and start to get more of a sense of the texture of a place. I think it's a much more effective way to visit a place and explore it. Really.
And sometimes it is those places in between
Mm.
that give you the best insight into a region too.
Totally. Yeah. And you think you're wanting to live in Valencia, and then 30 minutes out in the car, you drive through this town, or 20 minutes out, you drive through, what might be an outlying kind of residential area. And it's like, wow, actually, I didn't think that this was here. This would be amazing. And so I think that can really help with exploring, a location.
So, for someone who has decided Spain is the place to move,
Yeah.
is this the area to start with? Like, where in Spain, or is there another element you should get in order first before you start looking at locations?
I think I think there's sort of three things that you have to hold a little bit at kind of spinning plates at the same time. And I think the three keys are money, location, and immigration route, you know. And actually, though, you know what? There's actually one before that, and I referred to it earlier that I don't want to make sure I forget, and that is the vision. Like, that is spending time getting really specific on what you want your life to look like, um, and how does that sit with other people you're moving with? Are there any conflicts or compromises that are needed? And so once you have a clear vision of what life looks in Spain, then you have to kind of test it against the reality. And I think through that, location, finances, and immigration. So, immigration is like, is there an immigration route that will deliver you that vision for your life? A kind of a silly example is that I see people who are like partially retired. Like, I still want to dabble. I want to do my art and sell it on Etsy, but I'm not going to earn much money. It's actually quite challenging to find a visa for that for Spain right now. You're either non-lucrative visa where you're retired and you're not allowed to earn money, or at least declare it, obviously. But I'm always saying to people, if you're going to come here, then I think the ethical thing to do is to abide by the rules that you're kind of signing up for. And so, you could come on a non-lucrative visa, but then you can't work, and you should abide by that. And so, that's kind of the deal you've got with Spain, or the digital nomad visa, where you have to have an income threshold and overseas clients. Like, if you're kind of in the middle, so is there an immigration route that enables you to kind of has the features for the life you want to live? Investigating that, and that because you've done your vision. And then two, is there a location, or what are the different locations? So I think you're kind of looking at that online research. And then three is the financial side, and I think this is a big one. What's it going to cost? Different parts of Spain cost different amounts of money to live. Housing, you can see housing on the website Idealista, which is the main rental and buying site, and you can see what things cost. So that's pretty good. But what are people spending? This is something I spend time in the masterclass. Really building. I help people build out a budget using a tool I built with an economist. And so, with those three plates spinning, I think then you can get a start to sense of what is realistic. The other financial thing I would say is that, particularly with people coming, at retirement age, you're coming with your nest egg. And particularly if you're coming from the US, that can be kind of complex to figure out. You want to understand the tax implications, because you've got this finite, I mean, yeah, okay, you're earning interest and things like that, but you've on your investments, but you've got this pretty finite amount of money. You're not working to keep building, to keep growing that pot. And so understanding the tax implications can take time. So, a year before you move, you want to be looking at that stuff, meeting with a tax expert, a Zoom meeting with a tax expert in Spain, looking at what the implications are for your Roth IRA or your 401k, and whether you need to transfer money to Spain or whether you leave it in the US, and regardless of where you're moving for, whether it's the UK as well or Canada. So I think money, location, immigration path, those are the three that I say. And start with your vision and sort of let those things kind of feed up to that and make sure they're in place. And then look, the other things are not more minor, but they're usually okay. Healthcare, are you going to rent or buy, or rent and then buy? Like, these can kind of go either way.
Now, we did speak to a guest on this show about moving to Spain on a digital nomad visa,
Mm.
but I'm conscious it was about 12 months ago,
Mm.
and there has been a recent change. Could we touch quickly on what that change is and how it affects people who might be looking at the digital nomad visa?
Yeah. So the digital nomad visa is now 3 years old, approximately. There has been, and what happens often when a new law like this comes out in Spain, it's sort of announced, it comes out, and then it feels like the immigration department kind of learns on the fly a little bit and starts sort of plugging gaps, evolving the unwritten rules that you need to abide by when you apply. And so there's always like little tweaks happening that aren't actually listed on the page. But if you see people, if you're an immigration lawyer, you're seeing how these little requirements are changing. One big change, I'm not sure if this is the one you're referring to, but particularly is that previously it wasn't possible for US employees to move to Spain under the digital nomad visa as remote workers. You had to be a freelancer. You had to be a 1099 freelancer. But now you can be a W-2 employee. The issue was getting a specific document from the US Social Security Administration that was people weren't able to get. Now they are able to get it. And so now if you are working for, I don't know, you're a coder in the US and you're able to work remote. Previously, you had to go freelance for your employer or for multiple clients. Now you can actually remain an employee and apply to live in Spain under the digital nomad visa. And that visa you can actually apply for in Spain as well as a
That's
tourist.
really good.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and this is a big change because this was a really real sticking point for many people from the US who wanted to move here and set up a life. It was like, well, I could go freelance, but that feels complicated, or my employer won't let me. Um, and being freelance for one employer can actually be a little bit of a legal gray area.
Same in
And then
France.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
not really supposed to do that. So, there was that as well.
I think they call it hidden employment. Like, yeah.
Yeah, here it's called a false freelancer, which is
I
really
like
more
that.
of a kind of a labor protection rule, right? Because
Yeah.
then your employer is not paying all your social welfare, your
Social
social
charges.
things. Exactly. So,
Mm.
so that kind of issue has been removed, which is great for US employees who can work remote here.
Although for a US employee, you still crucially need your employer to agree, right? That you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
work for them from
yeah,
Spain. So
exactly. Yeah, you need to tell them you
get the
can.
boss on board.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's incredible how people do this. I met a guy once who was running a shop in a small town in Spain, and he was like, "Oh, I've just got to go off to a meeting." And his employer still thought he was in the UK, and so he'd moved to Spain to set up like a hobby shop, and he'd been working for this employer. I mean, I don't know what kind of job he had, but he'd been working for this employer for a few
That's
years, and the employer
amazing.
didn't realize where he was based. So, that feels very stressful to me.
It's very stressful. Be like, okay, I need to turn my camera on when I'm in a
I know.
neutral
Oh, quick!
environment
I turn it on,
only.
turn it off quickly. Yeah, like where are you?
You did mention a property website, and I'm curious
Yeah.
because this was a big culture shock for me when I
Mm.
moved to France. Do people in Spain advertise their houses privately on like Facebook Marketplace like they do here in France?
Not really. No,
Okay.
that's interesting. These are the interesting things that when you teach something and you know it and you live it, you're like, well, you don't realize kind of what is and isn't obvious, right? It can be easy to forget that, but no, nobody advertises their place on Facebook. I don't even think Facebook Marketplace is really a thing here in Spain. Like I've never seen anybody selling anything on it. So no, that's interesting that's in France. No, it really, there's a bunch of property websites, and it used to be that things were less online, so you would walk around the neighborhood and see for sale signs, and that was indicative, that was another way to look. But you know what, these days everything is on Idealista pretty much. Like it's like in all the places we've rented and in this apartment that we bought that I'm standing in, that's the only place we searched really. Now it doesn't mean that there might be, if you have, say, a property buyer working for you, a real estate agent who's working for you, that they're kind of like hustling around like the edges and their contacts and something's about to come on the market and that sort of stuff. But that's obviously something that's a little harder to access unless you're actually working with a professional.
So we just talked about the digital nomad visa. I am assuming that visas geared towards retirees are very popular too. Can we quickly touch on what options there are for people who are looking to Spain as their retirement destination?
Yeah, there used to be two really, and I'm assuming for the moment that this is for people who are not from the EU or don't have a spouse from the EU, because in that case, there's an EU route, which is much, much like in Spain, which is much simpler. But if you're from a third country like the US or Canada or New Zealand, Australia, or the UK, you need to. It used to be that you could have the non-lucrative visa, or there was the golden visa. And the golden visa was where you spent 500,000 euros on a property and you got residency. The golden visa disappeared, right? It's been taken away earlier this year, so no longer exists in Spain. So now, really, the main one, or the one that remains, is the non-lucrative visa, which is pretty. It's not a difficult visa to access as long as you have the funds. And for most people looking, say, coming from the countries I've mentioned to retire or live in their retirement in Europe, generally they have these funds that they have the around 30 odd thousand euros for one person, then more for two people per year that they can show. And that can be passive income, pension coming in monthly, or rental income, or it can be just savings that you have. So the non-lucrative visa is really the key one. And I always think of visa routes as they'll always have a bunch of different requirements. You got to show criminal background check, you got to show you got to have health insurance, but there's usually kind of one or two key requirements that the visa really builds around. And if the digital nomad visa is about showing that you are earning a certain amount of money in your remote role, then the non-lucrative, as I say, is about saying that you have these savings or this passive income. So you're not going to be a burden on the state, effectively. And that's one that you can't apply for in Spain. You have to apply via your consulate back home. So you figure out the requirements, um, which you can do it yourself. I always say, though, if you fit into one of three categories, which is you hate paperwork, you don't have much time, or you have a difficult case, then it can pay to work with someone, an
And they
immigration.
should just call you.
They should call me. Yeah, just because I don't do visa applications myself, so I can teach you all about all the options and everything. But yeah, if you want to, I will make you much more prepared if you want to do it yourself, obviously. But still, a lot of people that go through my course then decide to work with an immigration consultant, because in the end they don't want to do the actual application themselves. They hate paperwork. It just feels like it's gonna, and they want to lower the risk of Spanish bureaucracy. Is probably like French bureaucracy. I mean, I know I lived there for a year.
It
It's
was
a real
enough.
pain.
1 year would be enough.
Yeah, yeah. And so you don't want to, in a new country, you don't want to fall foul of some sort of unwritten rule that
No,
you know.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And so you did mention with the non-lucrative visa, you need to not be a burden on the state. Would that also apply with regard to health insurance?
yeah.
Would you have access to the local healthcare system, or would you need to come with a health insurance plan?
So part of your visa application for the non-lucrative visa is that you have to have a year's the first visa, or the first residency period is 1 year, and then you renew it for further periods. So you have to show you have healthcare for that first year, and when you renew, you have ongoing private healthcare, private health insurance, which is not, depending on where you're moving from. Say from the US, for example, compared to what you're paying back there for health care, this private health insurance is not expensive, and you get really good quality care. You can, after 1 year of residence, you can pay into the public system and access the public system, which can sometimes be actually a similar cost to the private. And most people stay with the private because it's just a bit more user friendly if you're not from Spain, and you're more likely
Mm,
to get English speaking doctors
English
and
speaking
stuff.
phone line and
Yeah,
referrals and
all that stuff. Where it does come in handy is that it is if you are moving to Spain and you have a pre-existing condition that maybe you've had to play down a little bit, we'll say, in order to get that private health insurance and pay out of pocket for the first year, then it's an incentive to get on the public system as soon as possible, because the public system accepts pre-existing conditions.
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
James, what in your experience typically goes wrong for foreigners in their move planning?
Hmm. You know, I there's as Spain has become more popular for people to move to, there's this sort of spate of headlines that I see on American and particularly British newspapers. It's sort of like kind of like, failed move headlines. And
Why I left Spain after 6
yeah,
months.
American woman is disillusioned after. And look, a lot
It
of it,
wasn't the dream I thought it would be.
yeah, and look, a lot of it is kind of the headline overplays the reality of how dramatic the thing is. One was a woman. I moved to Valencia. My life has gotten better, but it's not as entrepreneurial as I thought. Well, yeah, okay. So
Okay.
it's not Silicon Valley. So I think when it comes down to it, it's really simple where it goes wrong. It's in the vision that people have for their life and building a realistic vision of what life will look like. Really sitting down and I give people in my masterclass a multi-page vision checklist to go really so they can a workbook they can go deep and figure out what their vision is going to look like. What is that rainy Tuesday afternoon? What are they doing? What are they doing for the rest of their life potentially, right? So you can build this idea of this life you want and then testing it against the reality. Is that vision possible? Or am I looking to live in Madrid and walk to the beach, right? In an extreme case, I've got two things that can't go together. And so that's where I find people, maybe it's because they rush the move or they, and so they move to the wrong a location that's just not right for them. Well, they just had different expectations. And I think there might be another thing around this is more probably what these articles do is thinking that somehow Spain has to adapt for them or something like that. That I moved to Spain and I can't handle these eating times. And it's like, well, yeah, they they might seem crazy to you, but they're not crazy. They make sense within this culture. Whether you like them
Yes.
or not is a different thing, and it's fine for you to say you don't like them, right? Once you belong here, but don't paint them as if it's like we're all nuts or something because we're having dinner at 9 o'clock. It grows out of those things grow out of necessity and out of the reality of culture. So I think people don't build a clear vision. They get specific enough, and then once they have that, they don't do their research really just to make sure that that vision is possible or adjust it to something that is possible.
I don't know if you saw the same viral video that I saw, but it was about a woman making the culture point in the context of going into a boulangerie in France and asking for her ham and cheese baguette to be toasted,
Oh wow,
and the server saying no.
yeah,
And she said, "But why?" And the server said, "Because that's not how it's meant to be eaten."
yeah,
And she's like, "But you have the panini right next to it, and you'll toast the
yeah,
panini." And she's like, "Sure." She's like, "So why can't you just toast the ham and cheese baguette? It's my preference."
yeah.
And the server's like, "I'm not doing it for you."
No, I didn't see that, but it is interesting, right? Because on the one hand, yeah, that's culture. That's
Yeah.
culture, and so it's kind of having it's understanding that you're a guest at least at the beginning, and then look, I don't know, 5 years down the line, open a toasted baguette ham and cheese thing, whatever.
Yeah.
Like we can't also
Make it a novelty.
yeah, we can't live in this thing where they're not allowed to kind of comment, but take it slow, right? And open your toasted baguette thing, down the line, right? Once you understand more clearly about why that is, um, you know, yeah, it's an interesting one because I think we, on the one hand, so I recently in one of my last videos, and I made a comment where I was served like a pastry that was local to the area, and I made this sort of silly, irreverent comment that was like, something like mini Spanish sweets. It's sugary, dry, and something like whatever it was, right? And I say that from someone who's lived here for 14 years, who will soon be a citizen, who has a child growing up here and a life here and a marriage here. And I feel comfortable making sort of tongue-in-cheek jokes. But someone took really offense in the YouTube comments, like, hey, you did say that about my country. And it's like, look, I have shown a lot of respect for this country and I continue to, and I have a lot of reverence for it. But I also I belong here now. This is my country too.
And you don't have to like all the sweets.
Yeah, and you don't have to, like, not be able to comment anything, and so, but you have to kind of take it slow. I wouldn't, you've got to make it, and and the comment said, in my country, and I responded, well, in our country, this is what, I'm gonna make a joke, and so, but I feel comfortable saying that now after having been here for a long time, and I've traveled this country a lot, and I've eaten the food all around, and everything like that. So I think, you have to find a balance between reverence, but also not getting too, like, you can't speak, right? Because of the altar of culture, right? But it's also, you got to put in your dues before you can start to ask for the toasted baguette, right?
And sometimes you just have to accept that if you go to a boulangerie, they're not speaking as a Melbourne coffee snob, they're
Yeah,
not going to have a proper barista coffee machine.
yeah,
It's going to be a push button, something cut above a Nescafe
yeah,
thing you'd find at home. And maybe you're better off just not buying your coffee from there, or
yeah,
buying your baguette and toasting it at
yeah.
home?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, because also one of the things we lose is cultures sort of homogenize. I remember when I moved to Madrid, people didn't, you couldn't get takeaway coffee. It wasn't a thing. I remember seeing somebody get a takeaway coffee from a place, and they were walking along, and they had like a
You're
plastic,
like,
the bar,
where?
well, the bar had given them a plastic beer glass with
Ah.
now, which is the name of the beer, and had tinfoil like on top of it. Um, and because there was no kind of takeaway coffee cups. Now, obviously that's more common, but there is really good coffee in Spain now. The more traditional coffee has this process that can make it taste a little kind of bitter. And there's a part, and I always used to be like, I made a video about that. It was like, oh man, this coffee tastes so bitter, and it kind of went viral. But now I miss that a little bit because now all the coffee's getting too good. So
Getting too bougie.
yeah, exactly.
Well, we do have good barista coffee in Strasbourg now, and there was one place where you could bring your like reusable cup and
Yeah.
they would fill it up for you and you get 50 € discount.
Oh, that's good.
But I have to accept that I can't bring my keep cup into any coffee shop and expect them to use that instead of giving me a paper cup.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's true. Look, I mean, there's a tension between how things
Baby
are and
steps.
exactly, and how things evolve, and I guess that's just the reality, and that's okay.
James, in preparing for this interview, I received a note from you, which was that there is a simple question to ask yourself when it comes to planning a move to Spain, and that is, what is my rhythm?
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Why is that a simple but essential question?
Because I think it's a good question because, well, I guess there's two parts of it. There's what is the rhythm I have now, and what is the rhythm I want, and where do I find that? And if we think about a life, when you move to a place, often why we're moving is we're looking for just a life that moves and has a different rhythm from what we currently have. I see that for people moving to Spain. They're looking to slow down. I had a guy in one of my courses who showed me his before and after blood pressure levels before the move and after the move, and
Oh,
so
that's
his rhythm
awesome.
had really slowed down.
Yeah.
And so I think when you kind of want to think about what your rhythm is, it's part of that vision. It's kind of like an overarching, like, what does life look like? How does it move? Like, what are you doing in the mornings? Is it, some people want to move to Madrid and have that energetic vibe and be out and doing things and trying new restaurants. And some people want to live in a place where they walk into the bar and everybody knows their name. And so it's kind of a way of it's sort of an umbrella way to really think about how your life is and what kind of life you want and where you're going to find that in Spain. Because again, there are so many different rhythms in this country. There are small towns, there are busy cities, there's everything in between. And I've seen people, I met a woman once who had moved, and in her move, she had moved to a small town in northern Spain because that's what she thought she wanted. But then she realized it was really hard. Her Spanish wasn't great yet. It was really hard to meet people. So it's almost like that rhythm, that kind of small town vibe. Although that looked great, it just was not accessible for her yet. It was maybe down the line. And I think that's something else with a move, to think about it in phases. It's okay. A life evolves, right? I don't know if you've always lived in the same city in France, but you know, people move, right? And so what's right for, I mean, guy, I in my course, I do interviews with alumni who have made the move. And I was talking to one guy, Preston, and he was like, well, he moved on his own and he chose Madrid as his first place. Now, will he always be in Madrid? Maybe. But he was like, I'm not going to move to maybe that small town that I kind of like the idea of, because I know I need to build community first. So I'm moving to Madrid. That's the kind of rhythm I need. That's the life I need. I can build my life. And then the next stage, maybe, 5, 10 years, maybe another place. And I think it's okay to have that in your mind, not be too black and white about, it's going to be forever. I got to pick a location and never move.
Yeah, well, I moved from London to Strasbourg to join my now husband because that's just where he happened to live.
Yeah.
And I've spoken about this with another recent podcast guest, that a lot of people put less thought into like where they're going to move in the world than the color of their next couch
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I think I'm really guilty of that. I think I'm very lucky that I landed in a small but kind of dynamic city. There's a lot going on, and I
Yeah.
have a job that means I can leave regularly and travel and get my fix of big cities. Because
Yeah.
like from Melbourne, I lived in London. I love a big bustling city.
Yeah.
But you make a really good point about, does where you're moving to or where you're thinking of moving to match your rhythm? And if I'm very honest, Strasbourg maybe doesn't match my
Yeah.
my rhythm, but I've found workarounds that mean I'm happy here for now.
Yeah.
And that's a really important point you make, is that, it's possibly not your forever city,
No.
and to think about that.
And to feel empowered that you might be able to make a change, and the fact that you moved where your husband is, and maybe it's not a perfect match. It's also the reality of a life and
I
a
hope their
move.
relationship is,
Yeah,
but
yeah, 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 exactly. It's also the reality of a move and a life, right? That there's going to be some things that, look, part of me, one side of my brain wants to live in a small village in the mountains, and one side wants to live in a busy city, and I can't I mean, unless that we're all a bit like that, right?
Oh, I'm totally like, I want lots going on, bustling, busy city, lots of things to do, but I also want to have my regular places where people know me.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So then it becomes, because Madrid, for example, is a city like that. Then it becomes like, well, which neighborhood is
Mm.
going to give you that experience in Madrid, where it's, because the neighborhoods are then very different, and Madrid is a city of kind of little villages in a way. So which is the little village within the city that feels right for you? Yeah, I think that's important as well.
This last one is a bit of a leading question, and we did touch on it earlier. But what is, in your opinion, the best way to ensure that Spain aligns with your values and what you're really looking for?
I think look past those, you know, clickbaity headlines. Look past the TikTok from the guy who's been here for 5 minutes and is making statements about what Spain is like, and really, you know, look to learn from your own experience of traveling here. Look to learn from people who are providing advice about their own experience, and without an agenda, or a specific agenda of like, you got to live this way, you got to live that way. Just kind of connect with sensible people. I think community, I mean, as you'll know, as someone who moved to a new city and a new country, it takes a while to build community. But I think the community building phase begins actually before your move. To have a community of fellow people who are moving with you as well, and who are maybe 5 steps ahead of you or 2, 3 years ahead of you, I think is really important. And that it should be a kind and accepting community. I'm so sick of the Facebook groups where people ask honest questions, and other people put like the
It
laughing.
got shot down.
They
Yeah.
just get shot down. There's just so
Yeah.
much of that goes on, and I feel really sorry for people because it's not right. And
And you
so,
all have to start somewhere, right?
yeah, you all
Like,
have to start
you were
somewhere.
that person 14 years ago. I was that person 12 years ago. Like,
Totally,
yeah.
totally. So it's just kind of like it can really get people down. I think you really need to truly seek out to understand the country and understand yourself and what you're looking for. And that can be a little hard because, if I was looking at moving to France, like, I don't know that houses are sold on, Facebook
Facebook Marketplace.
Marketplace and all the
Other
variations
sites
of
too,
that.
but yeah.
So take your time, uh, understand yourself, understand what your move is, understand where that fits in Spain. Learn from experts, don't take legal advice from people on Facebook. Take expert legal advice from lawyers about immigration or tax, whatever, and then learn from the experiences of other good people who have gone before you or are doing it with you. And I think if you can kind of like hold these different things together and block out kind of the BS and the headlines and the fact that the fact is there's a lot of people moving to Spain, and so there's going to be media about it because there's money to be made, right? And so just block it out. If anything's oversimplistic or it seems more extreme, it's just not a realistic. It's not helpful. It's not going to help you understand, you know, how you can actually do this move, effectively and successfully.
James, when you met your now wife
Yeah.
in France all those years ago and followed her, I assume, to Spain,
Yeah.
is there anything looking back now that you would have done differently
Yeah.
in those first years?
100%. The biggest regret that I see that people make when they move to Spain, or the biggest tip that people who have made the move who say to people who haven't made the move, is start learning Spanish now. And now could be 5 years before you move. It could be 5 months before you move. Now is now. And I moved with a Spaniard. And so I was like, oh, osmosis. I'll just learn Spanish. I'm good at languages. I learned French. I can kind of like, and it was only after being here, and I got my Spanish to a really good level, but it was a lot harder and it took a lot longer than it should have. And it's only after about 12 years here that I actually got a Spanish tutor, because I found like, damn, there's these little things that I'm just still not getting right. And I just wasn't kind of nailing, and it was affecting my confidence. And so the hardest thing to do in advance of your move is start learning Spanish, because there's visas, there's health insurance, there's taxes to think about. But if you can find the time, if you can build a rhythm around learning Spanish, and Duolingo is not learning Spanish, it does not cut it. There is one difference between, say, working with a tutor who can see where you're at, what your level is, what your goal is. You don't want to learn business Spanish or tourism. You want to live in Spain, and can build a study plan, or there could be a good course that has a good study plan for someone who wants to move to Spain. Then yeah, sure, use Duolingo like as practice, right? But it's not a study plan. And so, try and just put the energy into Spanish, some kind of energy, and it will start to snowball. It will be hard. There'll be days where you just feel like an idiot. I mean, this, like French, right? And so, but you get there, you get somewhere, and you never get anywhere. We'll always be learning, and that's
Yes.
okay.
That was a really important mind shift for me. And, just this week I was in a cafe and I ordered a brie baguette and they gave me chicken.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that happens. I thought I was past that point where I would order brie and I'd get chicken, but I'm still there some days.
Yeah.
And this is how it goes.
That's how it goes, right? But there's something really exciting about the fact that I kind of camp out with the idea that it's like brain exercise. That I don't know. There's probably data there that people who learn a second language like live longer, or
Hope so.
Well, yeah, exactly. So
Let's go with that.
yeah, I think I've heard stuff like that. There's probably competing data that says the opposite, but
I've heard that it helps protect your brain against dementia.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. So God, there we go. So go with that. I like that. That is a big one for people, and I understand it's hard, but I wish I had gone into like an intensive language course and done that really early on, and not just thought like, I'll pick it up because I'm in Spain. No, you won't. Maybe if you spoke a really a language that wasn't commonly spoken, you had no other way to communicate, but you can always speak English you can always find an English speaker, and you will. You'll go, we go for the path of least resistance. So you gotta work on that one.
Got to be very intentional.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if they do want to lean into more of your knowledge and resources for their Spain move?
Yeah, great. I mean, if somebody would like to, learn a little bit about what it takes to move to Spain, I have a free move to Spain self-assessment that you can download. It's at spainrevealed.com/ready. READY. And effectively, that's a checklist you can go through, that you can see, how realistic Spain is in your future, and what you might need to take care of to make a move to Spain possible, covering things like immigration, healthcare, location. It doesn't take long to fill out, take about 10 minutes, and it gives you kind of a clarity score, a reading on kind of where you're at. And sometimes people find that they're actually closer than they think if they've been thinking about Spain a little bit, but it'll also give you a structure to think about, how to make a move. So that self-assessment, is over at spainrevealed.com/ready. Check that one out. From there, you'll sort of start to find me in different places.
James, I've really enjoyed this chat. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Carlie. I've enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can let me know what you would like to hear more of on the podcast by leaving a comment on our YouTube channel. Just search for Expat Focus. Don't forget to roll back through our archives where you can find more conversations about different elements of life in Spain. Check out the country guide at expatfocus.com. And while you are there, sign up to our monthly newsletter, and I will catch you in the next one.